When Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee were released, I was really excited. I was fresh off the heels of beating Pokemon Moon just a few months earlier and felt in need of some new Pokemon content. I'll admit it took me a long while to beat Moon, almost 2 years, and I never beat Pokemon Y or Alpha Sapphire. In both games I collected my 8 badges, got to Victory Road, and just fell off. So when I found myself watching the credits of Moon, it honestly felt a little strange. This was the first Pokemon game I had beaten since White 2 in 2012. But I felt a growing excitement for Let's Go in the month and a half between its release and my receiving Eevee as a Christmas gift in December. I was mostly looking forward to it because I knew it was a remake of Pokemon Yellow, the only Gen 1 game I had never played before. And while I wasn't ecstatic about the inclusion of Pokemon Go mechanics to the formula, I was confident Game Freak knew what they were doing. My first few hours with the game on Christmas morning were almost magical. Even though I've beaten Pokemon Blue countless times and knew what to do around almost every turn, it still felt like a new adventure, and I found myself lost in the newness yet familiarity of it all. But that wonder and novelty was short-lived. I'm not sure when I noticed it, most likely in the Cerulean City Pokemon Center, where a Pokemon tamer offered to teach my Eevee a smattering of moves. Bouncy Bubble, Buzzy Buzz, and Sizzly Slide. Not being a complete simpleton, I replaced Eevee's tackle with Buzzy Buzz, knowing it would come in handy against Misty in case I needed a backup. I didn't and still don't make a practice of sending out my starter much in Let's Go, as they quickly become overpowered and overleveled, and it just feels much less fun to me. Regardless, after teaching this 90 base power move to my level 19 Eevee, I decided to check my Pokemon stats and info. It was then that I noticed the first change to really irk me. A complete lack of abilities on any Pokemon. I should explain why this was so detrimental to me. Beginning in Generation 5, I began watching competitive Pokemon battles on YouTube. I was mesmerized by the advanced strategy that people employed when battling Pokemon. This was especially impressive to me because in Generation 3 and before, I was the kind of player who would only train their starter and reach the Elite Four with like a level 74 Typhlosion instead of a well-balanced team. But that changed quickly and drastically when I started getting into competitive battling. I remember over the course of a month and a half, I watched one specific YouTuber's entire channel, all 300 plus videos, front to back. I went so far back I was watching Gen 4 battles just to supplement my need for more battling. I was perplexed at first, trying to wrap my head around the intricacies of a game I had only been playing on the surface level since I was 7. But after a while, I started understanding which Pokemon were good in OU, which ones were good in UU, etc. I began to understand the goals and strengths and weaknesses of certain team compositions just at a glance from team previews. Eventually, I was so enamored with the idea of competitive battling that I bought an action replay on eBay and began salving my own Pokemon for competitive use. I never brought my team to local events. Most of the ones near me were Nintendo sponsored, so they scanned each competitor's Pokemon to make sure they were legit, and mine certainly weren't. But I would find streams of Poketubers I liked and jump into their chats, challenging them to battle. I lost a lot, but I had an immense amount of fun creating teams, challenging people, and duking it out. It was really helpful for me emotionally at a point in time where I was unemployed, really depressed, and generally didn't know what I wanted to do. The core of competitive Pokemon battling comes down to, at least in my opinion, 4 things: type coverage, base stats, abilities, and held items. And this is where I believe Let's Go really lost me as a player. Getting rid of abilities and held items meant that the only things left were stats and types. While some would argue that this is a good thing because the Let's Go games are meant to replicate Generation 1 battling, I have 2 rebuttals to this. First, the existence of Dark, Steel, and Fairy-type Pokemon, as well as moves released in Generation 2 and later, completely undermined the idea of this being a completely faithful remake of Pokemon Yellow. For that matter, you can trade for Alolan variants of Kanto Pokemon and even get Mega Evolution Stones. If the developers wanted to make a game that recreated the way that the Generation 1 games played, they failed in a big way. My second argument against the idea that removing abilities and held items is a good idea is this. The addition of held items and later abilities are net positives for the series. They add competitive depth to the games, and along with a deeper move pool, have created a much more cerebral and meaningful battling system than would be found without them. You really only need to look as far as competitive Gen 1 battling to see the truth in this. Competitive Red and Blue is a scary landscape with a handful of godlike Pokemon reigning supreme at the top of the echelons of OU, while the rest of the cast of 151 either fights to get the final 1 or 2 spots on a competitive team, or else they lie in the mud in UU. The Pokemon that are good are either that way because of type matchups, Psychic, Electric, and Rock ground types reign supreme, or because of cheesy gimmicks like Persian's almost guaranteed critical hit rate, or Blizzard's 30% chance to freeze. Gen 2 improved things somewhat with the addition of Dark and Steel types and held items, but it really only added one item that was used by every Pokemon barring edge cases: Leftovers. It wasn't until Gen 3 with its abilities and greater slew of held items that competitive battling really started to take the shape we recognize it in today. Abilities like Synchronize and Magic Bounce made trainers wary of statusing an opponent, lest they suffer the same fate, while items like Choice Band and Scarf made it so you needed to know the difference in damage that a banded attacker does versus a scarfed attacker, so you would know if your own Scarfer would outspeed to get the revenge kill. But Galley, you might be saying, Pokemon is a series for kids. Game Freak probably wanted to simplify the game enough that new entrants to the series would understand it. Then why, I ask you, did they keep Natures and EVs? These mechanics are two of the most esoteric and poorly understood among casual players, and neither existed in the Gen 1 days, so why were they kept on while abilities and held items, both of which tell you exactly what they're meant to do, were removed? Find me one 8-year-old playing Let's Go who understands the EV training, and I'll shut my mouth right now. But until then, I'll continue to be perplexed at the choices Game Freak made when it came to this entry. Pokemon has always been a game for all ages. I think Generation 5, and to a lesser extent 6, is at a wonderful middle ground where children can have fun beating the main story of a game, or catching every Pokemon available to them, or taking their favorite Pokemon into battles with their friends, while adults can have fun delving into the intricacies of the battling system, breeding for optimal natures, abilities, and egg moves, making competitively viable teams, and pitting them against one another in competitions. Sun and Moon began jumping the shark with terrains and Z-moves, but Let's Go erases so much of the progress that was made over 5 generations by simply removing 2 core aspects of the game. I want to be clear that I don't hate Let's Go. I think it's a fun, if simplistic, return to the original games that made me fall in love with the series back when I was 7. It really speaks volumes that Pokemon has been able to capture my attention for the last 18 years, but I also want to stress that without the rich and varied competitive battling scene, I probably would have fallen out of love with Pokemon years ago. Generation 8 comes out later this year, and while I'm wary of Game Freak after Generation 7, I'm holding out hope that Sword and Shield will be a return to form for the battling system. Based on the Pokemon Direct footage, wild encounters are being walked back to the way they always were, which is a good sign to me, at least, that the developers wanted to try something new with Let's Go, but not make it the new series standard. I can only hope this is true for the competitive scene as well, as there are certain Pokemon I can't imagine existing without their abilities. If I'm wrong, and Game Freak wants to make every game going forward the same way that they made Let's Go, I'll just have to accept that Pokemon isn't the series for me anymore. But a huge part of me wants anything but that to be the case. It's stupidly sentimental and a little selfish, but Pokemon Blue is the first video game I ever played. I've played Pokemon as a young kid, an adolescent, and as a young adult, and I don't want to ever lose that spark that I have for the series, even if it's become a less prominent blip on my radar in recent years. All I can do as someone who loves competitive battling is hope that the developers bring Pokemon back to the place it was before Let's Go. But if they decide not to, I'll have to be okay with passing the series on to the next generation of kids to love it the way I did. Hi guys, thanks for watching my dumb sentimental video about Let's Go and the competitive scene. If you liked this video, go ahead and subscribe for more gaming related video essays. If you liked it so much that you'd like to help me keep the lights on, I have a Patreon that you can donate to. It doesn't have much on it right now, but that will change soon. Anyways, thanks again for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful day.